We are here with our guest expert, Kristin Molenaar, who runs the podcast agency that gets experts booked on podcasts. And we're going to talk about how to be a profitable podcast guest. Welcome to the show, Kristin.
Thanks for having me, Majeed. Excited to be here to chat with you.
So I would love to know your background and journey with podcasting. How did you get into the podcast space?
Oh gosh. So I feel like I have to start a little bit at the beginning. After 14 months of utter entrepreneurial failure, because it's not giving full disclosure if I don't start there, I became a virtual assistant and I built up a virtual assistant agency. In 2018, my virtual assistant agency was self-led. So the people on my team pretty much took care of the clients without a lot of my help. And I decided that I wanted to get out there and talk to entrepreneurs about what I had learned about entrepreneurship, sharing what I had done wrong and what I had done right, what I was seeing clients do well and clients not do so well. And I thought, you know what? The lowest barrier to entry in my mind at the time was, let's be a podcast guest. There's all these people with podcasts out there, all kinds of different levels of experience in the podcast world. Like, let's get out there and just start sharing this message about, at the time I was calling it my work less, make more methodology. And so my team ended up pitching me for podcasts because after 6 months, I actually didn't pitch myself for a single podcast because I had a lot of imposter syndrome, but that's another story. So my team started pitching me for podcasts and I loved it. I would show up, I would talk about what I know. I would have really great connection moments with the person on the other side of the mic. I absolutely loved it. In my mind, I thought it was kind of a philanthropic thing, but what I very quickly found out is it became the number one lead generator for my business. The connections that I was making, the exposure and the credibility that I was getting as a result of being a podcast guest actually made my business grow easier than it ever had before. And so my team and I had been kind of wanting to niche down a bit. We wanted to be more specific in our offerings to our clients. So we tested this on our clients, like, hey, do you want us to get you booked on podcasts? And it did really well for our clients as well. So in 2020, we drew a line in the sand and this is all we do now. I am a guest on podcasts and we get our clients booked as guests on podcasts.
Okay. So what is the formula to get booked on a podcast?
Yeah. So I teach a find them, pitch them, keep them formula for podcast guesting. So, obviously you have to find podcasts that you're aligned with. So that's the find them. Pitch them is all about, how do you write a pitch that's going to stand out, that's going to be setting you up for a profitable interview. And then the most important thing that I have found where really the profit is, I would say 75% of the profit actually isn't just from getting an interview aired, it's from keeping them. And that's like the relationship. What are you doing with the relationship with the podcast host? What are you doing to leverage the content and the credibility you now have? So that's at the end. And that's our keep them phase of our process or our methodology.
So keep them means repurposing the content?
It means two things. It means leveraging the relationship and leveraging the content. So both of those things, staying in contact with the host, making sure that you're seeing all of the collaboration opportunities and, everything else that can follow after a podcast interview, like being invited to speak as a guest into paid communities or being introduced to another podcast host or, a speaking on stage opportunity or a, guest blog post that goes out, all kinds of different things. And then also repurposing the content on the back end, because now you have this really great interview. Just to have it air once and to never share it again really is a waste of your time. Well, not a waste of your time, but I would say you're not maximizing your time. So what are you also doing with that content on the back end? So the keep them is twofold, with relationships and also with that content, to make sure that you keep the profitability growing.
Okay, so let's say I know I should be repurposing my content. I'm doing these interviews and I know I should be making little Instagram stories and making little snippets, and I don't have time for that. Does your agency do that?
We have a partnership with another agency that does. The other agency runs like on a monthly, you just pay monthly, a couple $100s a month. You send your interviews and they kick back anywhere between 3 and 5 videos for you. And I'm not big on social media. So I hear you. I hate social media. I try to do as much as I can to stay off of social media, but I do LinkedIn. So that's like the little thing that I do. And just even putting up the content, 2 times a week, some repurposed clips on there it's still increasing my credibility among the people who are already following me. So even if I don't have like this big strategy to go out and find new people all of the time, even the people that are slowly building up in my network, they're seeing that I'm being interviewed, and it in their minds, it's like, oh, look at all these other people that are liking what Kristin does. Look at all these other people that like Kristin. And there's something about people like people that are liked. And so my credibility is boosting because that's what's going on in my feed. Even if I'm just posting, once or twice a week, that is still happening.
People like people who are liked. There's a good quote that would go in my podcast snippet.
I like that.
This episode is becoming a podcast. So I'm going to say to my podcast guy, hey, Luke, make that a snippet. People like people who are liked. I never talk to Luke. I never have, but Luke does all my podcasts for me.
Hey, you know what? I love that.
Thanks,
you
Luke.
don't have to talk to people on the back end to get this stuff done. You find just great people. Yeah.
Okay. And I was going to ask you how much that costs to get that agency to do the repurposing. So you say a couple $100, they give you 5 nice clips. That's excellent. Okay.
Yeah. And the thing I love about that agency in particular, I send all of my clients there because I'm just obsessed with this agency. It's unlimited. So as many videos as you can get, they'll return it around in about 3 to 5 days. And then you just submit the next one. It's like unlimited repurposing that you send to them. They're fantastic. So we send all of our clients there.
Can you give me the 2-minute masterclass on how to get booked on a podcast? Is it an email? Is it a phone call? Is it a video mail? What should I say? What should I not say?
Yeah. So there's a couple things that you need to know when getting booked on a podcast. And let's just talk about the pitch. Because I think if you just implement what I know about the pitch, it's going to up your chances of getting on a podcast dramatically. There are a few different things. So the very first thing is definitely say something unique and genuine and not canned at the beginning of your email. So we have some formulas for this. You can easily look at people's podcast like descriptions. You can look at some of the people they interviewed recently or interview titles. You don't actually, I hate to say this, I hate podcast hosts to hear me saying this, but you don't actually have to listen to a ton of interviews or even any of the episodes to know what you can say that sounds genuine, but make sure that you're writing something genuine in the beginning.
But I imagine if you do listen to an episode, it probably stands out like a little bit more effort.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
So we go from canned, which is the least likely to succeed,
don't even bother,
to customized, to obviously you've listened to an episode or two, probably the most investment showed. Okay.
Yep, exactly. The next thing is, in general, when you're thinking about your pitch, make sure that it's others focused. So the objective of a podcast host is to provide value to the people listening. What I see happening so often is people are so interested in sharing all their accolades that the person on the receiving end is like, cool, you make $1 million. Cool, you work 5 hours a week. Cool, you went to Harvard. And they're like, I don't know how that has anything to do with anything that I'm talking about. And so you have to get out of thinking it's all about you and thinking that it's about the audience. And how can you talk about your accolades in such a way that people see that it's going to add relevancy and add value to the audience. So that kind of ties into my third point, and that is that you have to have talking points. I have talking points in every single one of my pitches so that when somebody is saying yes, that they want to have me on their podcast, they know what the heck I can talk about. But what I'm doing is I'm like slightly, like I'm tweaking, I'm writing my talking points a couple ways. They're kind of clickbaity, and then they also have relevant accolades attached to them. So like when I was running the virtual assistant agency, I would say my work less, make more method for running a business as proven by my ability to grow a 6-figure agency in 5 hours per week. So like I'm saying what I'm going to give, like I'm going to give the methodology for working less, making more. The person on the host, they can see, is my audience interested in working less, making more? Is that something that we want to hear about? I didn't give too many details, so there's kind of some curiosity going on. And then you're seeing my accolades that I grew a 6-figure agency working less than 5 hours per week, but it wasn't starting out like all about me and what I have done. It was just tying in that I had the authority to talk about that subject. So always include those talking points. So custom introduction, or at least not canned, making sure that it's others focused and some really clear talking points.
Cool. And this is probably an email.
It is an email for us. Yes. Now, if you're pitching yourself, I love video. I think that it's really cutting through a lot of the noise. If you're going to make the effort to do it yourself, do that. Your analytics or your conversion rates are going to be much better. But we know what the conversion rates are for sending emails. And so we do this for our clients all the time. And it's just a numbers game at that point.
And do you make a video?
We don't. No,
Yeah.
We haven't needed to. No.
Got it. So they say, yes, we'll have you as we'd love to have you as a guest. They send you a link and they say, pick a time and fill it out. And they say, they probably ask for your bio, which
Definitely.
I assume you probably help your clients craft a killer bio.
Yes, absolutely.
They ask for a headshot.
Yeah.
Any specific tips on a headshot?
It just has to be high quality. I like things that are a little bit more casual. I'm not into the really stuffy, like, the LinkedIn headshots from like 5 or 10 years ago where you're wearing a suit. Not too into that. I like it to show some personality, but it needs to be high resolution. Yeah.
Okay. Bio, headshot. Maybe they'll ask for like a title of your talk if they were to present it. Okay. Yep. Now you're on the show. Give me some tech tips on how to show up looking good, sounding good. Should we go out and buy fancy microphones and lights?
Yeah. So my belief is that you should. I didn't in the beginning. In the beginning, I was on newer podcasts and I was keeping my barriers to entry very low. So I don't want to say that tech should keep you from moving forward. It absolutely shouldn't. But I have a nice light in front of me. I always make sure that I've got a light on myself so that people can see me. Some podcast hosts, they share video. And if that's the case, or if I'm repurposing clips, like I want to be seen in the best light, pun intended. I want to be seen in the best light possible. And then I have a microphone. I've had my Yeti microphone for, I've probably had this now like 5 years. And I want to say that it was definitely less than like $150, not a huge investment, but the higher quality podcast you go on, so the bigger your ambitions for being a podcast guest, they are going to want you to have a high quality mic. It's really annoying to listen to a podcast episode that has poor quality. I'm bummed that today I'm on my phone because I had tech issues, but I'm on my phone. So I'm on actually corded iPhone headset, which I used to do in the very beginning. So I guess that's another thing when it comes to tech, have multiple devices ready just in case. I've never had tech issues except for today. I did. And now I'm on my phone and you know what? I was able to make it work because I had another device sitting on my desk.
You still made it. Okay. Now lights are on, cameras on, microphones on, and action. We're on the show. What do we say to maximize impact, sales, referrals, everything else?
So when we write talking points for our clients, there are actually 3 different kinds of conversations that we are trying to tee up to happen on a podcast interview. So the very first one is your transformation story. So a good transformation story is going to show people that you both are relatable. So you've been where they've been and you're inspirational. You've done something that they would like to do. So being able to talk about your transformation story in a way that is succinct and not long and drawn out. You need to be able to do it 3 minutes. You need to be able to do it in 30 minutes. That's going to be really important. When you work with us, like I said, your talking points are going to start teeing up these conversations. So when somebody has your talking points, they're going to start asking you questions that you're like, oh yeah, that's where I talk about my transformation story, why I do what I do. For me, it's like how I got into being a podcast guest, thinking it would be a fun philanthropic thing to do. And I was like, wow, it actually is a really great lead generator. So that's part of my transformation story. The second one is case studies. So how do you talk about how what you do has also worked for other people, and talking about the results you've got for your clients and like things that you have done for your clients that have gotten them results? That's when you can get really specific on this is what I do and this is who I do it for. When I hear about people being a guest on podcasts and they are not reaping any of the profitability benefits, those 2 things typically are the missing ingredients. The person listening doesn't know what they do exactly, or it's too vague or too general, and they don't know specifically who they do that thing for. So it's like, I don't know if I'm your ideal client or I'm not your ideal client. Like, can you get results for somebody like me? I don't really know. So that's where you start talking about some of your case studies on the call. So people, including the host that's listening, like bells go off in their head and they're like, oh, I can literally think of the exact person I would refer to this person, this podcast guest. Either it's me or somebody I know in my network or somebody in my, coaching group, whatever. And then the third thing, or the third kind of conversation that we want to tee up that's done with the talking points is conversations around your methodology. So I think everybody knows at this point, but I can't say it enough. We can pretty much Google anybody's job. Like there's not really a service provider or a coach or a consultant or a practitioner that you can't find the same advice they would give you on the internet. Like we can find all of the things that we need on the internet. And so what my objective for me and my clients is that I want to share everything that I know about what I do and be a complete open book about my methodologies and how I get everything done. So much so that people listening, they can actually do it themselves. But what I know is that that's not my ideal client, somebody who wants to figure it out themselves and continue to consume free content. My ideal client is the person that hears the free content or hears me speak and goes, okay, I trust Kristin enough because she was just really forthright about what she does, how she does it. She gave me enough information and knowledge that now I can go and I could just hire her to jump over, the mindset issues that I experience, the, time that it takes to get me booked on podcasts. They can just come to me, and that's the ideal. That's the kind of client that I want to work with.
Fantastic. Quick recap. 3 types of things to talk about. One is, you called it the transformation story. We here call it the journey story. And we talk about our journey from pain island to pleasure island.
Yes.
We were in pain and now we got results, and that's the journey we talk about. The second story you talked about is called case studies. Yep. We call them success stories.
I love it.
And I'll give you a little tip, because we really drill into how we tell stories that are really engaging, memorable, and emotional. What we do is we say, what was the moment? And can you paint the picture? And what did it sound like? So, and instead of saying like, I remember having this conversation, you say, I'll never forget. She looked at me and she said, good. I tried everything and nothing works. And I'm ready to give up. And I looked right back at her and I said, don't worry. I know exactly what to do. So painting the picture, painting the scene, bringing us into the moment, that's what kind of creates that unforgettable emotional story. And we have a framework for our success stories so that people hear the success story and they go, gosh, I want results like that. Similar to how people react to a case study, I'm sure, as you're saying, Kristin. So the transformation story, the case study story, and you call it the methodology. We call it our proprietary process.
I love it.
We mentioned the steps that we take, and we give the process a name, the expert speaker method, the 5 steps to the expert speaker method. And I love what you said about your philosophy of giving away the content and the information. You give away so much that people can DIY, do it themselves. And that's awesome, because you're in service and you're helping lots of people, and your ideal client does not DIY. Kristin, I've never actually heard it. I've never heard it explained that way. The way I have explained it is a little less sophisticated. I say, give away all your content, give away all your good stuff, and the people who want to hire you, they're going to hire you. And I have a book called Expert Speaker, the 5 Steps to Grow Your Business with Public Speaking, which you can get at expertspeakerbook.com for free right now. And I literally give away everything in the book, because my ideal client doesn't want to read a book and do it themselves. My ideal client wants to hire the author of the book to help them do it.
Yep.
Right. Great insight. So don't be afraid, ladies and gentlemen, to give away all of your good stuff, because your ideal client is going to hire you anyway. And when you give away all the good stuff, they're just going to know that you know what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Great insight. Okay. So we're giving away the good stuff with our methodology. We're telling case study stories and transformation stories. And then the host says, well, that's all the time we have for today. And they usually say, how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so any tips for the best sort of call to action while you're still on the air?
I think I have an unpopular opinion here. I don't really care if a host asks me that what the next call to action is. I feel like I have done all of the value giving and information giving. It's almost like the whole conversation is like a long tail sales page that people know that they want to work with me by the end, regardless of what my call to action is or not. I think that there's a lot of emphasis from people that come to me and they say like, my freebie offer and my email drip series after my freebie offer, like I'm still kind of tweaking it or working on it. I don't have a great call to action yet. They say all these things. And I think that my opinion about this is that it doesn't matter so much, because when I became a podcast guest, I didn't think about having any of that back end marketing. Somebody would say to me, how do we get more information about you? And I would say, well, you can go to YesBossVA.com, and that's my, business website. And I was thinking, I don't know, you can go there or not. I gave you the information I needed. And what happened was that people wanted to work. I had given so much information that people were so pre-sold on working with me before I ever got to that call to action that they would literally go out of their way to find me. Now, I'm not saying to make it difficult for people, but what I am saying is don't put so much emphasis on that you don't start, or that you think that you have to nail that call to action at the end if you're going to get somebody. Literally, people just need to know how to get in contact with you. And oftentimes that information is provided by the podcast host when an episode goes live. Like oftentimes it's in the description, what that person's website is, or, what their LinkedIn profile is. So I'm not too hung up on that. What I am hung up on, though, is after the actual recording has stopped and what happens with the conversation with the host, between the host and myself, after the audience is done listening. That's where I feel it is incredibly important to get that aspect right. What I do is the very first question I ask is, how can I be of more value to you? Is there any way that I can provide more value to what you're doing in your business, how you're serving your clients? I really loved this conversation, and I would love for this to be more than just an interview. Like, I want to continue to serve what you're doing any way that I possibly can. And
let me just pause you there. Let me
Yeah.
pause you there and say that again. So what I heard was, how can I be of more value to you?
Yes.
I personally use a phrase called, what can I do to support you now? Because we're talking about action. You're talking about being. How can I be more valuable to you? The spirit is the same. The intention is the same.
Yep.
Okay, so how can I be more valuable to you now? And then I also like the language you used after that is, I would love for this to be more than just an interview. I want to support what you're doing. How can I be in support of what you're doing? Yep. So I think this is critical too. The emotions are peaked. We just hit record and we're kind of like high-fiving backstage.
Yep.
I used to be in an improv comedy troupe back in college, back in St. Louis, Missouri. And at the end of the show, the body chemistry, we're just all floating on euphoria, right? Yay, we did it. High five, right? And I think it's the podcast version of that. When you click done, you know, there's this sigh of relief and like, man, that was good. We did good. Like, we didn't screw this up. Like, we did the podcast. All right. And that's when you say, how can I be even more valuable to you now? I really would love to support you. I don't want this to just be an interview. What's next for us? How can I support you more? We were just talking earlier today, Kristin, before you came on. Juliana did a podcast and I recommended to her, hey, would you like to have me back as a guest? There's much more we can cover. Tell me more about how to really maximize this post-interview off-air conversation.
Yeah. So this is so important to us that actually when we tell our clients that we have a yes, that somebody wants to interview them for their podcast, we include in our podcast profile what that person is doing besides the podcast. So like, you know, this person also runs a mastermind that they're advertising on their website. Maybe you should ask them if they're ever looking for a guest expert for their paid mastermind. That is my number one favorite thing, is being invited to speak in front of a paid group. If you think about it for a second, podcasts are typically free content. So the people consuming the content on podcasts are free content. Yes, I've gotten clients from free content and I think free content is great, But if I can spend my time speaking for a half hour to an hour in front of a group of people that has proven that they already opened their wallet to get in front of this content, the odds are increased that they're also willing to open their wallet and invest in my services. So that's one of the things, like, we are proactively telling our clients, hey, this person has a mastermind, or they have a course, or, they have X, Y, and Z going on in their business that you probably should ask them about and see if there's any way you can add value. Something that I learned really early on in my entrepreneur journey too, is when I started, when I was an entrepreneurial failure, admittedly, I was creating some courses behind the scenes, and there are a lot of work to put together courses, a lot of work to put together membership areas, all that stuff. I proactively asked other people to contribute content to my courses that I was creating. But what I've found is, if you ask somebody, hey, can I contribute content to your course? I will just add value. I'm not going to sell myself. I'll just add value to what you're doing. And it'll be content that you can give to your paid clients that you don't have to create. I mean, think about that. Business owners are like, yes, please provide value that I can sell to other people. I'm game for that. And it's a really great way to take it to the next level, to show up in front of a paid audience and show that you really do want to provide value and you do want to continue this relationship with the podcast host. So that's my number one favorite.
Good. What else do you do for the podcast host? Do you send a thank you card in the mail? Anything else you do?
I love that touch. We don't send stuff in the mail, though I do have sitting in front of me right now somebody who interviewed me. He did send something in the mail, and that was really incredible. I was really touched by that. We actually have a checklist for our clients so that they or their VA, because I'm all about outsourcing as much as you can, they or their VA can stay in contact on a routine basis with the podcast host. So it gives our clients some ideas for how to do that. So it first starts with a checklist of what you can do every month. In addition to that, there's some notes that we take after an interview. So who is somebody in my network that I can introduce to this podcast host? Because that's another way to add really great value that I feel is so simple. Like, if Majeed, you and I know each other because of somebody named Aaron, like Aaron introducing the two of us. All Aaron had to do was give an introduction, and it was like, she's seen as the rock star because she put together this new relationship, right? So who in our my network can I introduce to the podcast host? Is there somebody in the podcast host network who down the line, when I feel it's appropriate, can be like, hey, how do you know Tony Robbins? Not that I'm going to ask somebody that, but how do you know Tony Robbins? That's really interesting. And you never know how far a relationship could get, or how much value you could have provided to somebody that they would be willing to introduce you to somebody in their network. So I'm writing that stuff down, and then I'm following that checklist. So that checklist is things like, how do I make sure that I'm staying top of mind for the podcast hosts that are interviewing me once a month? I could email them and say something about, they talked about their kids and their 3-year-old's birthday party. A month later, hey, I was just thinking about your 3-year-old and that birthday party. Curious how it went. Get on their email list. When an email blast comes out, simply reply to it, make a comment on social media. There's all these really, really simple ways that I feel like when you put it in a checklist and you tell your VA, hey, be accountable for this, it just happens. And you end up getting, at least for me, I have ended up getting referrals 6, 9 months, a year later from a podcast host that interviewed me however long ago, because I'm staying in contact with them and my name is continually being at the top of their mind.
You've given me a great idea. I recently compiled a list of all the podcasts that I have been on.
Yeah.
I may as well go to each of their social media pages and make a comment.
Yes.
I may as well subscribe to all of their newsletters and start replying to them just to get back on their radars, because I'm guilty of, okay, we're done recording. Yeah, nice interview. Let me know if there's anything I can do. See you later. I'm definitely going to share it. I'm a good podcast guest, but that's probably it.
Yeah.
I don't have the monthly touch point systematized or as part of a process. That's a great one.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything I haven't asked you that I should have asked you, or is there anything you'd like to share with my audience that we haven't covered yet?
I think to tie it all up in a really neat bow, there's one thing that I want people to understand about being a podcast guest. And that is that the most profitability comes out of this when you treat this like a new relationship. So I know that a lot of people thinking about podcast guesting think about it as another marketing strategy or another PR strategy, which yes, they are those things. But the way that I look at podcast guesting is it's networking on steroids. And I like using networking as the strategy to name the strategy, because it continually reminds me, this is about meeting people. This is about connecting with people, and people are what have grown my business and have made my business very fulfilling for me. And by treating podcast hosts that are interviewing me like people, I feel like I've seen a lot more profit than some other people that are just treating a podcast interview like a PR strategy or just like a marketing strategy. So I want to make sure that everybody really understands the greatest profitability is going to come from seeing the person on the other side of the mic as a person that you genuinely want to connect with and be a valuable asset to.
Okay, so podcasting is not just a PR opportunity, it's a relationship opportunity. It's a networking opportunity. Here's one thing I haven't asked you. Okay, so we haven't actually talked about being a podcast host.
Right.
And the thought came to mind as a podcast host. Personally, I'm a podcast host because I want to connect with experts who would serve my audience. I don't personally use the strategy of use my podcast to get clients by interviewing potential clients. But it's
which is a strategy.
It's one I'm looking at. So I work mostly with holistic doctors, and I'm considering if I had the Holistic Doctor podcast and I interview, let's say, 5 holistic doctors a month, 2 or 3 of them become a client. I'm wondering if you or any of your clients use podcast hosting as a client flow strategy.
I don't. I'm in the camp of never say never when it comes to being a podcast host, but I come out of my work less, make more methodology. And for me, it's like, if I can show up and do an interview for 30 minutes to an hour and not have to deal with any of the back end logistics or any of that, to me, it's logistically easier to be a guest. I do have a lot of connections with people in the podcast production space, though. So I'm very familiar what podcast host strategies are. And I feel like it's a really natural, easy strategy to interview potential clients, like what you're saying, having a show that interviews people that have stories that would your other ideal clients would identify with, but really getting on the phone and connecting with them. So I have seen that, but for me, I take the logistically easy route. My team doesn't know podcast production. I haven't had to teach them. They just know how to pitch me as a guest, and I can show up, and I say talking is my zone of genius. I don't have to deal with anything else. I just show up and talk.
Nice. Good. Well, this is the right podcast for you, the Expert Speaker Podcast. Thank you, Kristin. So for people who want to learn more about your agency, perhaps hire your agency to pitch them on podcasts, what should they do next?
Yeah, our website is YesBossVA.com. And like I mentioned, the only place I personally hang out is LinkedIn, but you can find me by searching for me on LinkedIn as well. And I share content there. What's
going on LinkedIn these days? I haven't been around.
I feel like yeah, I like it. I feel like it's all about business. Nobody's sharing, pictures of their kids and their cats and, their aunts and whatever. It's all just about business, and there's really good, valuable content there. So I've really enjoyed it.
Okay, good. I stay on Facebook where it's all conspiracy theories and complaining about politics, because that's what I need in my life. More of that.
And you know what, there are occasionally posts like that on LinkedIn, but then you'll see in the comments people saying, this is not the place for that. Go to Facebook.
Go back to the crazy town Facebook. Yeah. Anyway. All right. Thank you so much, Kristin Molenaar, founder of YesBossVA.com, and go to YesBossVA.com to find out more about getting yourself pitched on podcasts and being a profitable podcast guest. This has been How to Be a Profitable Podcast Guest with Kristin Molenaar. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Expert Speaker Podcast. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and leave us a rating so that more people can discover the Expert Speaker Podcast, and so more people can be empowered to share their message. Be sure to go to www.expertspeaker.com and take the masterclass to learn how to grow your business and make money speaking. It's totally free and will change your business. If you're ready to work with Expert Speaker, you can apply. Just go to expertspeaker.com/apply, and someone from our team will be in touch with you to help you grow your business with public speaking. That's expertspeaker.com/apply. We'll see you in the next episode.